Chapter 1. Ashlock Station. Ashlock Station existed because the iron spine demanded it. The platform was a long strip of riveted iron and soot-dark stone, built in layers that told a story of constant repair, rather than careful design. Lanterns hung from bent hooks along the walls, their yellow lights swaying in the heat and never quite settling, leaving corners in shadow where grime had been allowed to accumulate undisturbed. Steam hissed from exposed pipes at irregular intervals, fogging the air just enough to make the heat cling. Beyond the station, the land opened wide and unforgiving. Dry earth cracked beneath the sun. Broken rock and slag lay scattered where industry had once bitten deep and then moved on. Low scrub clung stubbornly to life. Thorny and sparse trees were rare, stunted, twisted things that looked more like warnings than shelter. The sky was vast, empty, watching. The train uncoupled with a heavy clank. Then it pulled away. No one waved. Ashlock Station was not a destination. It was a place you tolerated while waiting to leave, and once you had, you tried not to think about it again. Sirius Flack leaned against a crate of alchemical coal, its dull warmth bleeding pleasantly into the air around him. He was a tiefling marked by old infernal bloodlines that surfaced in horns, ember-bright eyes, and skin that held heat like stone after a long day in the sun. His horns swept back from his brow like polished obsidian, more decorative than threatening, though the scorched marks around their bases suggested he had tested that assumption more than once. Fire curled idly around his fingers, a spell half-formed and entirely unnecessary. Tieflings were often watched carefully around fire. In Sirius's case, this was less prejudice and more basic survival instinct. Old burn marks crept along the cuffs of his coat, repaired just well enough to pretend they were intentional. He glanced at the bounty notice with an expression that suggested he already liked how this story was going to end. This confidence had not yet earned its keep. A few paces away stood the hood. He was dragonborn, tall, heavy-set, his dark scales dulled by dust and travel rather than neglect. His tail lay still behind him, balanced and controlled. An executioner's axe rested against the ground at his side, its haft worn smooth by long use. The blade was clean, not polished clean. The hood did not fidget. He did not look around the station or watch the other travelers. He watched the rails. Dragonborn were often loud, proud and quick to anger. The hood was none of these things that was worse. Near the edge of the platform, Bear Pawstrong crouched low, one hand pressed flat to the ground, broad-shouldered and weathered. He wore practical leathers stained by dust and long travel. He looked like someone who had learned to listen to the land because ignoring it had once been expensive. At his side stood Mountain. The wolf was large and grey, scarred from old fights, his coat thick even in the heat. His ears flicked constantly, testing the air. When Bear shifted his weight, Mountain shifted too, never quite touching, never straying far. They moved like parts of the same habit. Slightly apart from the others stood Huan Shun. At first glance, he might have been mistaken for a shadow that had learned to stand upright. His body was covered in soot-black feathers, broken only by the sharp gleam of his eyes. His beak was closed, unreadable. Huan was Kenku, one of the crow-born folk, cursed long ago and left unable to create new speech of their own. He spoke only through borrowed sounds, whistles, clicks, echoes of words and phrases, carefully remembered and deployed with care. A heavy revolver rested at his hip, its grip worn smooth by habit. Where the others filled space with heat, weight, or presence, Huan filled it with attention. He said nothing. He rarely needed to. The bounty notice was nailed to the board with a dull clang. Missing freight convoy. Last contact east along the iron spine. Hazard pay. No questions. A station worker confirmed what little there was to confirm. Oil-stained sleeves. Tired eyes. No screams. No fire. No wreckage. The convoy had simply failed to arrive. When routes and maps were mentioned, there was a pause, a look, a decision made. A map was not offered, but neither was it guarded particularly well. Someone tried their luck. It did not go cleanly, and it did not go unnoticed. But the station worker chose to stare very hard at something else while it happened. Enough was learned to be useful. Everyone involved pretended this meant something different. Beyond the platform, the iron spine waited, twin rails vanishing into heat haze and badland. The rails hummed, not loudly, just enough to be noticed. They took the job. That was the first mistake. Leaving Ashlock station meant leaving certainty behind. The iron spine cut straight through the Badlands, a deliberate wound in dry earth and rock. The land rolled gently, broken by slag deposits and low scrub. The sun beat down mercilessly. There was no canopy, no shade worth the name. The rails vibrated faintly beneath their boots, a hum that settled into bone and teeth. The hood took point, Juan followed close, revolver loose in hand. Bear and Sirius brought up the rear, Sirius very deliberately holding a fireball like a personal philosophy. Hours passed. By midday, the hood raised a fist. Ahead, dead center on the track, sat a maintenance cart. No damage, no blood, no crew. The air felt tight. Sound echoed a heartbeat late. No one rushed forward. Bear knelt beside the railbed, fingers tracing dust and crushed stone. No struggle, no drag marks. Footprints approached calmly and then stopped. Not turned, not scattered, just gone. Something heavy passed through here regularly. Heat and pressure had fused stone and rail alike. Even mountains skirted the area, hackles lifting. This wasn't empty ground. It was claimed inside the cart. Everything was intact. Tools untouched, clipboard undisturbed. A book lay strapped beneath the bench, its cover scorched and warped by heat, but not destroyed. Burned into the inner frame of the cart was a sigil, old, incomplete, dead, a warning. The hood studied it in silence. Juan checked the perimeter. Sirius rummaged through drawers and compartments with growing irritation and emerged with exactly the sort of reward the universe seemed determined to give him. A bent spoon, a cracked lens, and several unidentifiable bits of scrap. He held up the spoon. This, his posture suggested, is an insult. The air shifted. The hum beneath their feet deepened. Telegraph poles along the line began to groan. Wires snapped free with sharp metallic cries, whipping through the air like flensing lashes. They folded inward, drawn toward the rails, coiling and twisting as if guided by unseen hands. Slag and steel followed, rail segments tearing free and bending impossibly, heat blooming along their seams. Something was forming. They knew it before it finished. The hood stepped forward, axe ready, presence heavy and deliberate. Bear, seizing the moment, attempted a distraction of his own, dropping his trousers and baring his arse to the half-formed construct in what could generously be described as committed. The iron-bound warden did not care. The land did not care. Bear pulled his trousers back up and pretended this had been a tactical choice. The iron-bound warden finished assembling itself, rail, slag, and wire locked into place. The telegraph lines stretched outward, like veins or control surfaces, vibrating with contained force. It did not roar, it engaged. It struck Sirius first. The blast of heat and force hurled him back, breath torn from his lungs, pain flaring bright and sharp. For one horrible moment it looked like that was it. For once his confidence was completely unjustified. Bear dragged him clear. Juan fired. The shot cracked something vital. Mountain-charged teeth sinking into metal that should not have cared. His weight and momentum helping to drive the warden off balance. The hood stepped in as it faltered. No flourish. The axe came down. The iron-bound warden collapsed into cooling slag. The iron spine fell quiet. There was a pause. Then the hood calmly unfastened part of his armor, stepped forward, and pissed directly onto the remains. No one stopped him. It felt important. They laughed. Some nervously, some loudly. Sirius laughed loudest, mostly because he was still alive. Mountain received enthusiastic pats. Juan clicked something that might have been approval. Once the adrenaline bled away, they searched properly. The book from the cart was opened and read. Its pages were dense with maintenance schedules, coded annotations and warnings, written in several hands. References to wardens appeared more than once. Not singular, but plural. The sigil, it seemed, had not been meant to summon anything. It had been meant to hold something back. Bear salvaged what he could, binding wounds and preparing what simple healing supplies the land allowed. Sirius glowered at the spoon again, then threw it away. They made camp off the rails as night fell. far enough to feel safer and close enough to know they weren't. The land was open and exposed, broken rock offering only minimal shelter. The fire was built low and shielded. Gear was checked. Wounds were tended. Mountain ranged outward, returned, ranged again. Each time he came back, Bear rested a hand on his head, scratching behind the ears in quiet thanks. The hood slept lightly, axe within reach. Juan took watch, eyes on the dark. Cirrus talked until he didn't. The iron spine lay nearby. Watching by morning, they were rested and no longer unnoticed.